IVM.
Hi, everybody. Just wanted to ask everyone for a quick favor. We're running a brand survey right now and would really appreciate it if you could let us know what you think about the advertising on IVM. Go to ivmpodcast.com/survey and do let us know. As part of this, we'll be selecting 10 random participants and sending them some IVM swag, so do fill out those surveys.
Hi and welcome to Know Your Kanun. This is Amber from EM Rana Ventures and welcome to the 100th episode of Know Your Kanun, and we are proud to have someone so senior, so well accomplished. Rather, I cannot do justice to his bio, is all that I can say. He's one of the few learned people who I have met and dignified in a way that he has held many prestigious positions. Sukanta sir, welcome to the show. Please kindly introduce yourself, as I cannot do justice enough, as I said earlier also. We're happy to have you here.
I'm humbled by this introduction of yours, Amber. I had my early education in IIT Kharagpur, mechanical engineering, then IIM Calcutta, an MBA in finance and marketing. In those days, very few people did MBA, so people are wondering what course I was doing. Then joined the covenanted management cadre of Hindustan Lever, which is today known as Hindustan Unilever. Then worked in several organizations in leadership positions. The notable ones are PepsiCo, where I was part of the founding team way back in 1989. And then also I was in the founding team of what is today Idea Vodafone, way back in 2001, when I was the chief operating officer of that time, Idea AT&T Wireless. In fact, we used to sell the AT&T Wireless brand in our operating circles of Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Goa. Wireless telecommunication is a licensed business, as you know, and I've been in this business now since 2001, and I superannuated at the age of 60 out of Tata Teleservices as president of their emerging business division about 9 years back. And right now I am a global management consultant in the area of FMCG, telecommunication, IT, and general management. So
Superb, go ahead,
go
sir.
ahead.
There's much more to it. Please, I want you to tell them about Borg as well.
Yeah. So right now I hold a couple of important assignments. One of them is a global M&A advisory firm, goes by the name of Borg Associates. They're headquartered basically in Paris, where the CEO is there, the French gentleman, Mr. Emmanuel Crane. And we have very senior investment bankers from the likes of Goldman Sachs and Merrill Lynch. They are in various cities. There's a very senior gentleman in Moscow, who is the co-CEO. Our CEO is based in Paris. Then we have a very senior person by the name of Richard in London. And we have in our New York office, Elizabeth. So we have a team of very senior and distinguished Goldman Sachs and Merrill Lynch sort of ex-senior investment bankers who are part of this M&A advisory. I head the vertical India position, and we do a lot of M&A advisory work. And obviously, corporate law is part of it, and or any law is part of it. And I also am the principal advisor to the Hinduja Group for their telecommunication and media ventures, which goes by the name of One Broadband. As you know, since the days of the pandemic, broadband has become the lifeline, because there are a lot of work situation from home and even from offices. But without a strong broadband connection, even this important video conference will not be possible. Over to you, Amber.
Thank you, sir. That is why I said, it would be better if you introduce yourself, because there's a host of accomplishments that you hold to your name in a corporate sector and otherwise. And thank you so much for being a part of us as well. We'll want to tell all our listeners that sir has been kind enough to advise us in our global, consultancy and management profile and division that we have at AM Rana Ventures. And he's the senior most, I would say, in terms of the board of advisors we have. And sir is with us now. We've captured onto his skills, and we are looking to synergize and create more a beautiful work, sir. And with your guidance, of course, we look forward to doing wonders. And And furthermore, sir, thank you so much again, yet again. And I'll now come to the most interesting part that I always ask everybody on the show. So you've had a career span when India was being liberalized, and let's talk about, back then the economies, especially the Indian economy, was not so open, and the concept of doing an MBA or the concept of business was heavily regulated by a lot of economic reforms which were to come, but they were all stale. So, for what would you tell? Because this is a legal show, right? And when we talk about compliance, we talk about business, we talk about compliance from a perspective where they both are interlinked. The business cannot be wonderful without compliances or with compliances. But what would you tell the audience that you have seen, or your in your experience has been a paradigm shift? Maybe some of those, if you can tell that, what is the difference that you felt at the time of your retirement and when you started? How easy is it for corporates to operate?
Amber, you have opened an extremely interesting perspective because India in the 1950s and 60s was what was known as the command economy, which meant that the government was kind of involved in every aspect of corporate life. The private sector was a mere, I would say, 10% of the fixed asset investment, and 90% was either the public sector or the government. Today, the situation has changed, but not so much. I would say it's double. 20% would be private sector, but 80% is still the government, with huge corporations like the Life Insurance Corporation,
Right.
like the General Post Office, like the Indian Railways, etc. Everything is controlled these way, and all the ports. Some ports are controlled by private companies, but the large ports are still with the government. The electricity generation and distribution is with the government primarily, barring one or two cities. So the whole corporate world, as is known as the corporate world, is still controlled heavily by the government. But of late, I must have seen that the government has also realized that these have to be slowly privatized. If you
Right.
look at the United States Constitution, if you read the Constitution very carefully, the basic preamble to the Constitution, as then written by people like Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln and all the people who wrote it, they wrote one line which is very critical to what we are discussing. And that line said, and I'm reading it verbatim: the government shall do no business. The word is shall. The government shall do no business. The government's job is governance, is law, is compliance, is making sure everybody obeys,
Absolutely.
creating law, creating regulation. So the government's job is, I would say, 100% a legal job, and to implement the law, carefully and make sure everybody obeys the law. Now, I can't be playing the football match and still be the referee. I have to be either playing the football match or I be the referee. I can't be both.
Correct. Correct.
So in the case of the United States, the referee is the government of the United States. Everybody else is allowed to do their business or whatever they have to do. So over to you, Amber.
No, sir. So, this point I brought up because I think when you would have joined even Hindustan Lever, if I would say,
Yep.
an excise was a major issue back then.
Yeah,
I'm talking from it used to be a major issue back
yeah, I
then.
know that.
Maybe some of your experiences, funny ones you've had. We keep it very light on the show, but back then in Punjab, Haryana, UP,
Yes,
Maharashtra,
yeah,
excise inspector was a god that would attend
yes, yes.
your factory, and you would have to just please the god to get a simple approval, which would just be, you would be shocked to know that this could have been done over a 10-minute discussion. That's it.
No, I mean, I'm recalling an incident in Hindustan Lever. There is something called, because we sell packaged goods. So
Right.
there's a packages regulation order of 1977. That was the
Right.
first packages 1957. Sorry,
Right.
the first packages regulation order. In
Right.
that, you have to print what is the maximum regulated price.
Right.
You have to print the taxes and various other things, and the invoice is raised in relationship to that. So there's a sales, there is an ex factory price, there's a sales tax, etc., etc. And so we used to run consumer offers. So we
Right.
used to say, okay, one Saral matchbox, that was a simple matchbox,
Right.
free with, let's say, one Lux toilet soap.
Right.
Now, the Lux toilet soap has a different sales tax, and the Saral soap has a different sales tax.
Right.
The Lux toilet soap has different excise duty and blah blah blah. So, to make a very simple, sort of a light humored story, because the sales tax were not matching, the sales tax inspectors, etc., they raided our godowns, and then they made a big story out of it. And our branch director was a very senior person, our head of
Right.
North India actually.
Right.
He had to spend many hours, not days, but many hours. He had to go to the police station. He had to explain this, that, vagara, vagara. So there were a lot of tensionful moments, on what is so simple. I mean, they were obviously using a simple law to just create some pressure and tension amongst the senior board level people of a big company such as ours. I mean, thinking back, we used to think that we waste our energies doing this. We should spend our energies, whether it's a government inspector or the government, in building the nation. There's so many important things to be done. There's so much of poverty. Like in Delhi, we are living in Delhi, there's no rains. And why are there no rains in Delhi? Because we have cut all the forests. So
Right, sir.
we have cut. If you go to the Aravalli Hills, we have cut
Absolutely,
all
sir.
the trees up there, and all the monkeys are now around my house because they were all living there. And there's no rain. It's so hot because of all this. No, we think this is a joke, but this is so serious, and
Absolutely, sir.
we don't pay any attention to simple things like the climate change, etc. We don't follow the regulation of because of the courts of law, at least the Aravalli range to some extent has been protected. So I think the government plays a very important role in the actual implementation of the law. We have good
Right.
laws. Laws are not a problem. How you implement is there's the most important part of the story of a law. Over to you,
No,
Amber.
absolutely, sir. Because when I was doing indirect taxation and I started my journey, I apparently had no sense of what indirect tax was, and and this was before GST came in, so it was so heavily regulated. So much the concept of Inspector Raj was still existing, if I would say, because they were still regulating small things. And since you narrated an incident, I'll narrate one where a small time permit for a company to open its, or for a manufacturing unit to open its or lay the foundation to the factory was to be done. And there used to be this physical visit that used to happen by these excise guys to give approval. That it should have a canal running, it should not be touching a water body, the area should be wide enough to include your fire and safety measures, etc., all of that before the approval for the factory comes in, site approval comes in. And at that point, we were wondering that, because the gentleman who was there was not so learned, and I don't say all of them are like that, but he was not learned at all about the laws, and they had just studied the basics. And on account of which, our clients, which were a global global MNC, they had to suffer. I mean, they were saying that we want to pull out our investment because we cannot get a basic approval done. Now, when something like this comes in, sir, this is called heavy compliance, and ease of doing business is killed. And you've been here, you've seen Pepsi grow. And when Pepsi came in, I'm sure there's PepsiCo would have had a lot of regulation, and it had a huge hue and cry. Coca-Cola had a bad experience in Bangalore,
Yes.
if I remember very vividly. How was that from a regime perspective, sir, in terms of
So I will.
taxation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. You have really kindled my memory.
Sir.
So when I joined Pepsi, and as I told you, I was on the founding team. I was the 13th employee of Pepsi, and we didn't even have an office. We used to operate from the Taj Mahal Hotel in Mansingh Road. And the government said that, hey, we can't allow the Pepsi brand, it's a global brand, the
Right.
Pepsi brand to be operating in India. So initially they approved that we can have a hybrid brand.
Okay.
Indian brand, Indian name, and Pepsi. So initially, if you see the history, and in fact, we make huge amount of bottles. See, in our business, we are those days there was even a returnable bottle business. So
Right.
the bottle is filled, and the bottle comes to your house, and the bottle goes back. Now, the PET, the plastic bottle, the polyethylene terephthalate, is a new thing which has happened last 10 years. But those days, there used to be basically glass bottles, and there were heavy investments because is a returnable bottle. It keeps going up and down between the factory and the consuming homes. And so we had to print, it's called a label on top of the bottle. It's called ACL.
Right.
It's a like a plastic label which is printed on the bottle. And the government approved that you can't use the brand name Pepsi. You have to use a hybrid brand name. So we thought, and we said we'll use the brand name called Leher Pepsi.
Leher.
If you ask, Leher
Yes.
Pepsi.
Yes.
So we launched it with Leher Pepsi when all those glass bottles we made, and we kept fighting that we should use the word brand Pepsi. And after a couple of months only, the government allowed us to use Pepsi. Imagine all that investment in the glass bottles gone down the drain.
Yes.
We had to destroy all the glass bottles.
Because I remember as children, as the youth coming up, Leher used to be the thing. That Leher was, I think, sir, something that I remember. It used to be associated with Namkeen also, with Pepsi
Yes,
as well,
yes,
and
yes,
you know,
yes,
it was
yes, yes,
it
yes.
was quite heavily regulated, and hence you could never find a foreign company coming in. And I think KFC had a bad time in India as well in 1980s.
Very bad.
When they came
Yes.
again in Bangalore, and they had to shut and run away, and because there was no liberalization. So, sir, we'll come to the next part. I'll come to the next part, which is the 90s, when Manmohan Singh and the government opened up the economy in a major way. And liberalization happened, FDI started pouring in. How was that as an experience, sir? Because you've had experiences with multiple of these bodies, and then Tata's, of course. And now the 90s, what was the difference, if I could say? I feel the 90s were better than what we are today. I mean, I'm not experienced enough to say that, but I think the 90s really opened the Indian economy in a major way.
Yeah. Everybody knows this, that when Mr. Narasimha Rao was the Prime Minister,
Yes.
we were a situation where we had no money in our purse,
Right.
and we were absolutely a bankrupt nation. We could have become a banana economy.
Right.
And at that time, the finance minister was a little known person called Professor Manmohan Singh.
Right.
And it was Manmohan Singh and Mr. Narasimha Rao who took some very drastic steps overnight. And that changed the actual fate of India for the years to come. And if I may say so,
Right.
that the three important people, and I'll give you reasons, who really changed the fate of India was, in the early days, Lal Bahadur Shastri.
Mhm.
So he was there for a short while. He had a slogan called Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan,
Correct.
which focused on agriculture, building agriculture, and making sure we had a stable country. Narasimha Rao did wonders to the Indian economy, which is well known. And the last person what I'll allude to is Bajpayee, Mr. Bajpayee, the
Yeah,
first BJP
yeah.
Prime Minister.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you the reason. When I joined the telecommunication business in 2001, I was sitting in my office, and this guy says that, sir, the circle, we were a licensed this thing, so
Right.
the circle license fees has to be paid. So Gujarat circle, every state is a circle.
Right.
So I said, yeah, sure. How much I have to pay? I have to pay to the government of India.
Right.
As you know, even today, Idea, Vodafone, and Airtel
Everyone
pays
pays.
huge fees.
Everyone pays.
Huge fees. Both of them are way behind their payments. Everybody knows that. Anyway, so I said, kitna, how much pay? I thought it's a small payment. I'll just sign it as gone. He said, no, the license fees per year, that time, I'm talking about 2001, was 175 crores for the state of Gujarat, for the circle of Gujarat. I said, what are you saying? There's some mistake you're saying. Well, no, it's 100. Here it is. Here's the paper. My turnover in the state of Gujarat is not 175 crores. How can I pay 175 crores of
As
license
fees.
fee to the government of India, to the Department of Telecommunication? I said, yaar, ye kya ho gaya? I said, you make a license fee which is related to my revenue. If my revenue is 100 rupees, you charge me 10%, 15%, 20%,
course.
whatever you like to charge me. How can you give me a fixed? So it was actually Prime Minister Bajpayee who moved the circle fees of telecommunication from a fixed rate to a revenue share, and that opened up the telecommunication business. That was what sprung the telecommunication business. So it was the simple legislation which changed the fate of Indian telecommunication, and that is why today even a rickshawala has a phone in his pocket and he can communicate to his village way in Bihar or wherever.
Yeah, wherever. No, sir, and rightly said,
it is the legislation, it is the regulation which changes industries all over the world.
No, absolutely, sir. And India is heavily, at least I can talk from tax India, and then from law, if I talk from labor law, India is heavily regulated with outdated labor laws. They haven't changed, whether it's telecom business, whether it's any sort of business. When it comes to labor laws, we are really lacking behind. And I think we have so many legislations that I haven't even read all of them. Like, I wouldn't be aware of what the labor code is and how it operates, because there's multifarious of them. Now, something like a telecom, which was completely new to, I would say, the Indian diaspora in terms of the government officials, the tax officials. What were some of the key challenges you felt that could have been held really better? So, because at that time, compliances were huge, people did not understand. Like, to give you an example, maybe approval for a tower, coming up in your circle, as you were saying, it would have the amount of paperwork gone in doing so. Again, I stress on the term compliance, because people don't understand that apart from the management side of things, the team doing these and doing all these filings like yourself, it requires immense amount of engagement and knowledge to be able to explain the person, the authorities, to give a go ahead on this. And I mean, whether it's the smallest thing or the biggest thing. So in terms of compliance, how heavily was telecom regulated? What would you have to say of that?
So I would say that the telecom regulation from day one was very heavy because of the history.
Right.
If you see the history of, it was under one ministry, broadcasting and telecommunication,
Right.
and that ministry was held with an iron grip from the days of Indira Gandhi, when Mrs. Indira Gandhi was
Right.
Prime Minister.
Right.
That portfolio was hers. I mean, even though there was a senior minister,
Right.
but the minister couldn't do anything with, because telecommunication is everything, is information. No, if
Right,
I
of
want
course.
to get some secret information from you, I'll tap your phone. How can I tap your phone unless I have full control about the telecommunication industry? Telecommunication
Right.
is the most important thing. I mean,
Right.
even today we are having this wonderful
Yes.
discussion because of
Yes.
telecommunication, because of
Telecommunication.
broadband, etc.
Absolutely.
So it was an iron grip of the industry. So there's the almighty DOT, Department of Telecommunication,
Right. Dot.
which
Yes.
kind of reports even today to the Prime Minister. And the Department of Telecommunication is omniscient and omnipotent and everything. And over a period of time, it changed slowly. So there's a lot of, right now, for example, there is a very big fight between, there are two cases which are there. One is the Vodafone case, which you keep
Right.
hearing of.
Yes.
Then that very large amount of money which Vodafone has to pay because of the transaction,
Mauritius
whether it was
tax
offshore,
treaty.
onshore, etc.,
Yeah, offshore.
Yeah, all that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is one. Secondly, the idea Vodafone owes a lot of money to the government even today as I speak, and so there is something called AGR, Adjusted
Okay.
Gross Revenue, and
Right.
you pay a percentage of the AGR as a tax, as a revenue tax, as an indirect tax to the government of India. That was what Bajpayee had changed from the fixed license
Okay.
fee to the revenue license fee.
Okay.
Now, so that is a very complex calculation. If you go to 3 experts in this field, all of them will come with a separate figure. So the government has their own figure, the company has its own figure, and then they now they have an appellate tribunal from the Department of
Yes.
Telecommunication.
Yes. Yes.
Has an appellate tribunal, which is basically the adjudicating authority who interprets the law. Now they have a third figure. There's a no. This is what you have to pay. Now there is the payment is of course delayed by many years. So there is an interest on that payment, which is huge. The interest is probably more than the capital itself, because the payments have not been made for last 10 years, etc. So I mean, the whole thing, if you look at it from a legal and an indirect taxation
Right.
point of view,
Right.
is a very, very big mess. Now, if we say we want to become a $5 trillion economy, if we say telecommunication is so important to the common man, which it is, then we have to somebody has to take the leadership and take a one-time hit or whatever and change it. And telecommunication is so heavily taxed. Number one is this gross revenue, the indirect taxation, the revenue,
Right.
the revenue share.
Right.
Number two, there's something called spectrum. Spectrum is the airwaves on which
Yes.
which
is
the
sold. Yes.
which is sold. Now, a spectrum is like land. The land belongs to whom? The land of India belongs to the Indians. No, the government is a
Absolutely.
middleman who is regulating the land. But the
Absolutely.
land technically belongs to all the citizens of India.
Right.
Similarly, the spectrum which is on top of India belongs to the citizens of India. The government is an elected body to regulate and use the spectrum in the most meaningful manner for the
Right.
benefit of the people.
Right.
But the spectrum license fees are so difficult and so huge that, you are set back initially. I mean, you have to pay that fees, otherwise you can't operate. You can't, without the spectrum, obviously, you can't have a wireless telephony. And the other important thing is that most of the spectrum is held by the government armed forces, or the government navy, or the government
Right.
itself. So they are
Right.
squatting on all this land, just like the biggest land is in India is owned by the Indian Armed Forces, that is well known,
Right.
and next by the railways and so on and so
Right.
forth. So you are not, point I'm trying to make is you must use productive usage of all these resources, land,
Right.
spectrum, these are all resources. And the
Right.
legislation is a very enabling situation, enabling method of making sure that these countries' are resources are used to an optimum. So
Absolutely.
if you look at the United States, their spectrum is regulated in a different way. Their land is regulated in a different way. They are making productive use of those countries' resources to build the nation, and that is where legislation comes into play.
No, absolutely, sir. You know why I even stress on this, that I remember Spectrum under the service tax regime was a headache for calculating the taxability due to how the service and I worked very little on it, but it was about how the service flows and how the spectrum operates and how do you tax and what is the indirect tax to be calculated, the service tax which is paid on it. It was a mess for us, and I could never get a hang of it because taxability of towers, and because I think it used to come under installation, erection of structures, and it was a complex structure to understand even for a professional, until unless they've had on hands experience of how this operates. Cut to the late 2000s, sir, as you're saying, and you've known the broadband sector, you've known it for Tata, you've known the spectrum sector. you know Everybody in India says that Tata is the most compliant company as far as ethics, compliance, way of serving the nation in a way goes. Your experience, because everyone says aisa nahi hota, sabko paisa dena padta hai, everybody has to pay, and ultimately these compliances get approved, you have to pay. But I have an opinion here that I've had a little bit of a chance to work on some project with Tata, and I've never heard from anyone in the organization that some kind of these practices were followed to evade compliances. Because as far as we could do a due diligence, or we could even go through small parts, we were amazed to see how amazing Tata's compliance records were. So is this that you're saying that as a practice it was ensured there? Is it the culture of Tata that imbibes this honesty in people? Because this is something that in 2000s everybody was saying, you throw money, you get this, you throw money, but eventually Tata did not get anything out of order or anything out of place. So this is, I don't want your official comment on it, but from an experienced professional's perspective who's seen the industry, what do you have to say on this? What can you say on this?
Yeah, not only Tata's of course, but I have been fortunate to work with very large companies. They are Fortune 50 companies.
Yeah.
Whether it was Hindustan Lever,
Yeah.
whether it was Idea Vodafone, whether it was AT&T, whether it was Tata. The big companies, as a matter of rule, they will spend an extra money in understanding the regulation. They will keep experts and expert sort of chartered accountants or lawyers or expert opinion people, but they will never pay any money for to government official to get something which is firstly they'll follow the rules, so they'll spend extra money on the compliance, let me put it that way.
Yeah.
So they will make sure they're 100% compliant, and if for some reason they cannot be compliant, they'd rather not do the activity. Like we have come to many situations where we found that keeping the compliance was very expensive. We said, yeah, we don't want to do this. So we in all these big companies, they want to spend the money in the resources of making sure that we are fully compliant with local regulation, because otherwise we cannot operate. We will be seen differently, and then most of the big companies, the actual persons who are operating are professional people, in the sense that they are not related to the owners or directors or what have you. So they're all independent, they're all employees like I was. So we have no axe to grind of our own, in a sense. And so we do the full compliance. And because of the expertise, which the other very important thing is because of the expertise in law, which has been imbibed and developed within these organizations, sometimes the government used to ask us opinions about how to form the future legislation because we were
Wonderful.
practicing managers.
Right.
We were practicing managers. So we used to say that, हाँ GST इतना होना चाहिए या sales tax, whatever it was called, इतना होना चाहिए, इससे ज़्यादा नहीं होना चाहिए, तो कमती भी नहीं होना चाहिए, because government also has to earn money at the end of the day, and we have to also make sure that we are able to tax the consumer in a manner which the consumer can afford to pay also. So you have to make the industry survive, you have to make the government survive, both have to survive. So the taxation has to be is a balance of both the worlds. And the
Absolutely.
balance is always tilted in favor of the consumer. Consumer means all of us in any average Indian, because at the end of the day, the final payment is made by the consumer, by the Indian consumer, whether it's a telecommunication product, whether it's a soap, whether it is. So we have to be finally in favor of the consumer, because if the consumer stops buying, then there is no industry. No.
Absolutely, sir. And my maybe second last question to you, that a piece of advice you can provide from, and maybe some technicals on someone who's looking for a startup. Let's say someone who's looking to start something in this field, in telecommunications, in broadband, in network. What can you advise to them? What can you definitely tell them that how can they go about it? Maybe that could be some real good information which you can meet out to young entrepreneurs in India.
Yeah, any industry. It can be a textile industry, it can be a soap factory, it can be say a metal industry. All now, what has happened is there's something called, we are now in the wave of what is called the fourth industrial revolution. The fourth industrial revolution, and the first was agriculture, the second was industry, and the third was IT and telecom. And there's a fourth industrial revolution is things like artificial intelligence, then things like immersive technology, things like digitizing. Everything is digitized. Like you buy things online, you make payments online, you don't physically use even money. So digitization and the digital world is a very new thing, and there's a lot of work to be done in the digital world. For example, let's say a company which is a manufacturing pharmaceuticals and it's distributing medicine. Now, one aspect of it is it's doing well. It's completely doing everything offline. But can you digitize the whole operation? What does that mean? That means that when they're having their physical inventory, let's say they have 4 godowns all over India. So how do you do the inventory management? You keep physical Excel records or registers, and you say, this much amount of inventory is there. But if you digitize the whole operation, all these 4 go downs are linked with the head office, and you know exactly how the flow of goods are happening almost on real-time basis. So your actual holding cost of the inventory comes down, because you may have a situation in the physical world, in some stocks are higher in some go down and it's finished in another go down, and therefore there's a loss of sale in one go down, and the other go down has excess stock, so you're just spending money on working capital and inventory. So when you digitize this thing, the whole operation becomes far more efficient. So I would advise startups and companies, youngsters, to do a lot of work on digitization of the existing companies, infrastructure, anything you have, whatever the existing companies are. Because India and the world requires a huge amount of experience in digitization. One of the examples of what is Amazon? Amazon is an electronic store. It's a digitized store. And that's why Amazon is so big. Amazon themselves don't do anything, in the sense that they don't manufacture any products. They actually don't even sell any product, but they're a platform. They're a digital platform. You go and buy the product from that store, and the guy Amazon person delivers it at your home. So you are doing the buying. The manufacturing is done, let's say, by Hindustan Lever. They are making the inventory available. They are packaging the goods. The pricing is done by Hindustan Lever. So everything is done by other people. Amazon is merely a platform. So that is called the digitized economy. And you're
Wow.
making the payment to Amazon through Amex card or through any credit card, etc. That is a digital way of payment. So there are
Correct.
many aspects of the digital economy which are still many parts of India, like agriculture has to be digitized, electricity has to be digitized. So many things have to be digitized, and people are working on it. Security has to be digitized. So we require so much on hard security. That means we send some guys with guns or lathis or something. But you need cameras, you need soft security, which is far more effective than hard security. And you can and in order to intercept cybercrime, again you need digital solutions to intersect cybercrime. For example, somebody has access to my bank account electronically. He can empty my bank account electronically. I won't even know. Now that's a cybercrime. And how do you prevent that? So all the banks have firewalls, etc., etc. So cybersecurity, digital cybersecurity is another vast area which there's a lot of work happening. And most of this digital sort of information is stored in what is called the cloud. Earlier, they were stored in the servers. A server is a machine which is next to your computer.
Right.
Now you don't store it in servers. Neither do you store it in the data centers, because there's too much of data. You store it in the cloud. What does that mean? You store it; it goes up in the air, and there are very large data centers in some parts of Europe, US, which stores your data. And then how do you secure the data in the cloud? So this is a whole new industry which has opened up, which is called the digital economy and the cyber economy. And there's a lot of work, interesting work on any end of it. You can do payment gateway solutions, you can do cyber security, you can do digital e-commerce, you can make electronic stores, you can do even in suppose you're interested in the fashion industry. So how do you do the designs on the fashion using what is called immersive technology, where it means a guy, he can wear a shirt on using imaging and all that. You don't have to make the shirt. You just put the color and image and etc. You say, hey, this is how you look if you have wearing a shirt like this or a blouse like this. So there is a lot of digital imaging in the fashion industry which is happening, etc., etc. And not to talk of entertainment. As you know, right now the movie halls are closed. So there is something called OTT, over the top, OTT channels, which are there on your television. And you can see almost, whether it's Netflix or Amazon or Disney Hotstar, there are 40 plus OTT channels. And you can say, like right now, I'm speaking to you as soon as I finish my call, I can just see a movie right now. I don't have to go to the hall or anything.
Right.
I just sit over here, continue to sip my tea and see a movie. So the digital part of the economy is where startups can do a lot of work.
Absolutely, sir. And this is something that I personally feel that since our sectors are opening up, economy is opening up in terms of more investment by these startups. But thank you so much for being on the show. It was a pleasure chatting with you, and we've covered most of what we wanted to. And thank you for letting your insights in on this, sir. And again, thank you so much for being with us here today. It was a pleasure chatting with you, and I hope our audience is able to garner some of the knowledge shared by you on the show today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Amber. Thanks to all of you.
I hope you enjoyed that show. Let me tell you a little bit about what happened on the IVM Podcast Network this week. On Cyrus Says, Cyrus was joined by Irfan Pabani, who is an old friend of his. They talk about the rich flavors of Indian food and Parsi food specifically. He was also joined by author and historian William Dalrymple. They discuss literature, history, and the culture of the Indian subcontinent. And let me give you a few quick things to check out. Chuck, aka Deepak Gopal Krishnan of Simplified and the Origin of Things fame, has Rohan Joshi, formerly of AIB, on his show. Also on this round is on me. Gautam Purohit of Thakur's Bhojnalaya was on. On the note, Maruk Nair talks about the cabinet reshuffle. And do check out Global Victoria Tech Talks. We talk about the booming gaming and edutech industries in Australia. Do follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram to keep up what's going on the network. And I'd like to finally thank our sponsors on the network this week, Cred, CIET, and Global Victoria. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Eventually, you'll see the end of your childhood,
Get accustomed to womanhood.
enjoy the experience of sisterhood,
Might get to wifehood
or not, choose motherhood,
or not. You'll learn to define your personhood.
earn a livelihood,
Change the neighborhood.
and get rid of the falsehood that life post-academia is easy.
So join me, Natasha,
And me, Ayushi,
on a journey from station starting point
to station, what now?
next station, Pudil station, and hopefully Agla station, adulthood.
Fresh episodes out every Thursday.